Okay. Welcome, guys. Just here connecting with Miss Michelle Harrison, who's a part of Fight for Peace, and we'll get into it. So, welcome, guys, to another episode, or at least the final episode for this season, our 10th episode of the Therapy Tuesdays, hosted by me, Leslie Bell Navis Elliott, who is a registered art therapist. Hi, Emma. Welcome. So we've had different topics, and I'm excited about my guest today because we're going to talk about something that I feel is really important. So just a bit of history. I am a registered art therapist, Jamaican, trained at Florida State University, and have been practicing art therapy for the past 12 years, the past 11 in Jamaica, doing different projects. And that's how I also met Michelle, working on one of my projects, and we've had to collaborate in the past. So today we have Miss Michelle Harrison, who is a part of Fight for Peace, and I'll have her introduce herself a little bit, or yeah, we can get into that. For those who are new for the first time, join us for the first time, you can always listen to past interviews on the Art Therapy Jamaica's IGTV or on Art Therapy Jamaica on my YouTube channel. Right? So, Miss Michelle, can you tell us who you are? Give us a little bit of your background.
Sure. So I'm Michelle Harrison. I'm a psychologist with the UP Unity and Peace program, which is facilitated by Fight for Peace. I've been in the field of psychology for 13 years. I have practiced in Jamaica as well as overseas. I have generally worked with the same population because from very early on, I just realized that I had a passion for helping young people in particular. So I've always done children and teenagers. I've actually only had one adult client. I realized very early on I wanted to work with children and adolescents. And so I've really been working with them to help them, achieve their potential.
Okay, awesome. So thanks for that, Michelle. Before we get into the meat of the matter and the topic for today's show, is I always start off the talks with a check-in activity. And for those, this person's maybe new to you, it's something that we do in therapy. Different therapists use different kinds of activities, but it all sends it helps with a ritual, and it helps with a system to kind of center clients, ground them, and a way for us to know like what's happening. So the check-in activity for today is, and Michelle, you can respond, or viewers can post their comments in the comment section. I want you to think of a color, shape, think of how you're feeling, and you can show it either in a color, shape, sound, or movement, or a combination.
Okay, so this is very easy. I'm going to do a movement. Bear with me. It may look strange until I explain.
There's no judgment.
So it's just la 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 la. And the reason that movement was chosen is because it's actually something I have done with my nephew since he was born. And I just heard that he just came over. So I immediately got happy because I can hear him in the background and I can hear him. So that's my movement. So if you hear a child screaming in the background, I apologize. It's a little 2-year-old.
That's fine. We are child friendly here. And so what was the feeling again? What was the feeling? Happy? Oh, so we're on the same page. Mine is actually a circle. We can't see because it's yellow and yellow, but yeah, so Mine is a circle, and I'm happy. Happy about the conversation today. Happy about where therapeutics has gone, the feedback, and just having this dialogue, and hopefully starting some gems for people to tap into the conversations for therapy, for whatever the feel is, but just having support for persons, especially during COVID and post COVID. So, Michelle, you mentioned a little bit of your background. Again, for those who are just joining us, this is Michelle Harrison from Fight for Peace, and she's a psychologist. And the topic for today is Unheard Voices, Supporting Children Living in Communities Affected by Violence. So, Michelle, can you tell us a little bit about Fight for Peace and your role there?
All right, I will do a very quick spiel. So Fight for Peace is an international NGO, and our mission is to help young people realize their potential, particularly young people living in communities affected by crime and violence. So we use a 5-pillar methodology. The 5 pillars are boxing and martial arts, which is kind of like the hook to get them excited to come into the program, as well as education, employability, youth leadership, and youth support services. So the 5 pillars provide a very integrated approach, which allows us to support young people in overcoming some of the challenges and some of the barriers that they may face, and allow them to tap into their full potential. In Jamaica, we are a hybrid, a very exciting hybrid, in that while we use our 5-pillar methodology, we also utilize a collective impact approach, which is where we bring together a network of local partners, including community-based organizations, international agencies, donors, state agencies, as well as the private sector, to provide programming in the 5 pillars. I have to shout out some of our partners, because in Jamaica, unlike in London and Brazil, our program is not delivered by Fight for Peace. All of our programming is delivered through this network of partners, and we wouldn't be able to reach young people if we didn't have this network of partners. So shout out to partners like Joytone, Rise Life Management, Peace Management Initiative, the various sports federations. So,
and maybe Art Therapy Jamaica in the future.
I believe I saw Michelle on the call.
So yeah, so Michelle, that's great, and I think I've seen some of the work that Fight for Peace does. I've actually kind of logged in sometimes on the morning programs. Is it capoeira, or no, it's kickboxing that you guys do? I catch some of
we do capoeira. We do capoeira.
No, I saw
boxing and martial arts is we do boxing, capoeira, mixed martial arts, and taekwondo. And we have amazing coaches. I mean, these are great coaches through the federations.
Okay. So we know that COVID has impacted us in different ways, causing persons to have to try to adjust to difficult situations, and are still trying to adjust. There are certain groups of persons we may not consider or think about what is impacting them emotionally and or psychologically. Based on your experience and working with children living in communities affected by violence, can you discuss how the children are impacted during this time?
Sure. So COVID has presented some challenges that are, kind of universal. So we do have the challenge of being asked to stay at home, social distancing, and those sorts of measures. But for young people living in some of these communities, there are additional challenges that some of those measures create unintentionally. So for instance, there's sometimes challenges accessing the internet. They may not have consistent access to internet, which affects their ability to keep up with school. So for them, a lot of them are worried about, will they fall behind? They also have the natural anxiety, especially if they're doing exams. What will this mean for their exams? they miss their friends, because for some of them, school and programs like the UP program are an opportunity for them to engage. It's an opportunity for them to socialize. It's a safe place. And so for some of them, they're definitely feeling a little bit cut off because they don't have the opportunity. And as I said, some of these challenges are not unique because they're living in these communities. However, in addition to the challenges that COVID presents, because there are high levels of violence, they do have to be cognizant of what is happening around them. So there is often, they need to take safety to a different level. You and I may be only focused with keeping ourselves safe from COVID, but especially in the last few weeks, a lot of them are now concerned with upticks in violence. And this, of course, creates a whole other challenge because...
Yeah, that compounds it.
Yes, it compounds it, because violence creates anxiety. And when you're kind of isolated, it's not like you can have that release. So a lot of the kids very regularly, even more so now, are saying, everybody's auntie or uncle in the program, when are you going to open up? Because for some of them, it was an opportunity to just escape. It was an opportunity to engage in activities that allow them to kind of put the worries aside. Because the way the program is set up, they don't even realize that we're providing support. For them, it's just a fun program where they come and do some capoeira. They get to talk to Auntie Unique or Auntie Michelle. They get to participate in EduSports, which is another program from one of our partners, Breads, which is a game-based activity to help with literacy and numeracy. So for some of them, they're missing that interaction. They're missing the escape. So they're kind of feeling the pressure. They are feeling the pressure with all of these worries.
And so for those who, you had that system and you had that outlet for them, and then you mentioned the struggle with not always having access to the internet, how are they being met on the ground? And I'm sure there are probably some areas that you work in that are parts of the state of emergency, correct? Zones?
Yes.
So how are they able to get some kind of psychosocial support or emotional support during this, or even physical support?
So it's a good question. So I want to highlight a framework we use that guides us in how we operate, and it's psychological first aid. And it's kind of mental health equivalent of first aid. And what that means is support can come from anyone. It can come from a parent, it can come from a teacher, it can come from the vendor. And because we work with, we call them community coordinators, which are community members on the ground, we still have a lifeline. We still have a connection, bearing in mind all of the measures. So they, because of that psychological first aid, because they're trained in it, if a crisis occurs, they do have access to immediate support. Another thing that we have done is we have put as pretty much all the program online now. So we've had sports sessions, as you can see on the IG. We will post, workouts and so forth. We have had a few personal development sessions online as well. Our book club has moved online, and what we've done is we have tried to lift some of the barriers. So if it's access to internet, we have figured out how do we get them that access. So access to internet isn't a roadblock, and that's what the program is about. It's supporting children in overcoming those roadblocks. We don't want them to focus on just the roadblocks. We want them to begin realizing, how do we find solutions? Because there are solutions. And the entire psychosocial support team has moved everything remotely. So we do this through phone calls, we do this through WhatsApp, sometimes it's through text messages. Whatever way we can reach them, we do reach them. And we have a hashtag, we don't stop. And
Mm-hmm.
we have a policy that we show up for the young people because they show up. One of our values is inspiring, and we find that our young people inspire us a lot. Yes, we want to inspire them, but they're so resilient and they're so committed to the program. Like, they will ask, I haven't seen you in 2 weeks. Where are you? Or they will say, when are we going to have the next session? Or they will actually message us and say, hey, remember, book club is coming up. So
Yep.
we don't stop. You have to figure out a way to keep going, because they're going to show up. They're still very receptive. We have to keep going for them.
And what about their families? Because you talked about, like, you used a phrase earlier, Michelle, you have to remind me, where it's like, I receive it more like it's like a network of support. So how do you work with the families and the parents or guardians to support children within the project?
I'm actually glad you highlighted that, because I forgot it. We've also had some parent workshops online, where our focus has been on positive discipline. And these workshops are a continuation of workshops that were going on pre-COVID. And out of this focus on parenting, we had some campaigns that were developed by the communities. They gave us their ideas and we just supported them in the implementation. And out of these campaigns, out of these initiatives, out of these activities, some of the communities now have reignited. They've created parent support groups. So again, under the umbrella of psychological first aid, where anyone can provide support in a crisis, the parent support groups are there to help us to reach the parents. Another way we support parents and families is that even whenever we're talking to the young people, we have conversations with the parents as well. Because the truth is, children and young people, I keep calling them children, but they're really young people. They don't exist in isolation. They come from a family. They come from a community. And also, some of the support they need to access, we do need the parents' input. And we also recognize that parents themselves have their own experiences. They have their own histories. They have their own challenges. So we really try, through the integrated approach, to just meet everyone, listen to everyone. So during COVID, we've really focused on just, if there's support that's needed, we provide it.
So like, what kind of support? Like on a psychological level now? What are some, so, because what I can say is I have worked with, I've had clients or done projects with children and young adults who have been impacted by violence or live in communities that are affected by violence. And generally, sometimes it's different things that's presented psychologically and emotionally. And is not just denoted to just those experiences either, but just for the nature of the topic. Sometimes I may see issues with trust, issues with vulnerability, not issues, but the trust and trusting that I can be vulnerable with you and knowing that I need support right now. Other things, just like respect of space and what is mine versus I have to share it with you. And that comes up in the art therapy process. It comes up in how they make art, how they share the materials. I remember I worked in a prison setting, and it was really hard for me to understand, like, when we reach this part where we're supposed to talk about what you have created and I'm supporting you as a therapist, nobody's talking. And I just never understood that. But then I had to take a step back and say, okay, the environment where the children were at, that wasn't necessarily what I shared with you in therapy. You don't know if that's going to be used against you. or they didn't feel safe to share their emotions verbally. But when I looked at their artwork, the amount of emotional stuff that was being processed in the art was deep, and so they really gravitated towards that. So for you, Michelle, what, you know, psychologically or psychosocially, what, you know, what are some responses and what are some tools that you've had to use?
So for us, psychological first aid has really been a great framework because again, it allows everybody to realize the power they have in providing support. So our coaches are trained in psychological first aid, our facilitators are trained in psychological first aid, all members of staff are trained in psychological first aid. The first
Sorry,
Sure,
can you
go
break down, I know what it is, but can you break down what psychological first aid is?
All right. So psychological first aid, as I said, is like the mental health equivalent of medical first aid. So in medical first aid, you're not going to be given a medical degree. However, you're going to be given the tools that allows you to support somebody in a medical crisis until they can get more long-term intensive medical care. Psychological first aid is a mental health equivalent of that. So what it does, it focuses on non-clinical persons in particular, because the truth is crises can happen anytime. And what it does is it gives anybody who is trained the ability to, one, recognize when there's a crisis, provide support to help the person manage those difficult emotions, and at the same time allow them access to more long-term services. So in the moment you address some of the negative emotions, you recognize that there's a crisis, you're able to provide that first aid while connecting them to more long-term services and supports. So when you have anybody who works with these young persons operating under that, very quickly children realize they don't have to go to one person. It's who do I want to go to today? Another thing about that framework is that it stresses collaboration, where it emphasizes you have to work together.
Like a team.
As a team. And when a young person realizes the coach is saying the same thing, as a coordinator is saying the same thing, as a psychologist, they begin to realize, okay, this is how it is. The third thing is, it's very easy sometimes to say, oh no, for you, this is what's happening. That's not what's a psychological first aid. It doesn't focus on just the problem. What it does is it's about helping the individual understand how they can cope. So you're building up their coping potential. So they have a sense of empowerment that this is a challenge, but there is help.
Go ahead.
Well, the fourth thing I would say is, I don't go into a session and say, I'm Michelle Harrison, I'm a psychologist. Because the truth is, a psychologist is just a title. It's really just a title. What I want them, and what all of us as a team want the young people to realize, is that we're there to support. So I'm Auntie Michelle. And many of them, I will know them for several years, and it's not unless they go to a formal event and my title is shared that they're a psychologist. And by approaching it from just relating to them, that's all it is. It's just about
human level.
When things happen, so we're now seeing an increase in them not only coming to us on their own, but telling other people, like you'll see them come. No man, talk to her. She will help you. And we try to learn the community we're in as well. So if we're having a training, we try to get catering from within the community. So, it's the community itself builds a trust. We try to be branded with you can't really see my shirt, but we try to, develop this sense of identity for the kids. And all of that helps to break down some of the trust. So that's the first thing. We call it a community of care. the young people begin to realize they have this network, and this
Mm.
network is there to support them. And because we focus on their strengths, we do focus on their strengths. So we don't go into any situation saying they have nothing and I'm there to give them everything. No, they have so many strengths. Some of them are amazing in how they articulate. Some of them also have amazing leadership potential. And so we're just a guiding force. And when young people realize that you respect them in that way, and when they realize we're working together, they're
And they
really
have a
open.
voice.
And they have a voice. That's the youth leadership. We actually have a youth council where our young people's voices are heard. We're putting on an event. We ask them their opinion. Even with the book club, we know that they may be tired of certain sorts of activities. What are you interested in? So they feel empowered, and this helps. And that's the first thing. You have to help them realize that they have the power within them, and we are here to support. I think you were going to ask a question.
Oh, it's fine. Those 4 pointers were really great. I was asking about, so what are some coping, if you could break down some coping strategies or supportive strategies for the children, because you talked about coping earlier.
Okay, so I'll direct you to one that's on our IG page, so you can actually look at it. The other psychologist, John Earl Spence, has, I think it's turning into a series inadvertently, focusing on deep breathing. So the first coping strategy, or the first type of coping strategy rather, that we focus on is dealing with those difficult emotions. So helping them to recognize first when they're experiencing these emotions. And it can be something simple as, when you feel yourself angry, where do you feel it in your body? So it forces them to begin to focus on, where am I feeling this? Because sometimes all they think that happens is they go from 0 to 100, not realizing that they get their certain triggers. So it's like, where do you feel it in your body?
And I can add to that from the art side, sorry to cut you, that you can ask that question and the person has to think about it, but then I will actually either have a template where a figure is traced, because sometimes you can't always touch the clients for different reasons, different psychological and emotional, and you want to respect boundaries reasons, or I may trace the individual and have them identify certain emotions, associate a color with it, and depict that on the body tracing, and then there's a discussion. So it transcends just the where on your body, but actually seeing it and talking about it. So
yeah, that's also a good way to do it. The color, we might say, what does it look like? Is it a particular color to you? And so sometimes they can turn that into a code word. Like they can just say red. If anger means red, if that's their code word, then they can just be like red. So the first thing is, we help them to acknowledge when these emotions are coming up. Another thing we do is to help them name it. Because a lot of times they don't have the language. They don't know how to name an emotion. So everything is, it made me feel a ways. Yes. And by helping them begin to develop that language, once you can name the emotion, you can begin to think about, okay, how do I deal effectively with this emotion? But if you don't really understand what you're feeling, then you may feel, I don't know how to get rid of it because I don't know exactly what it is. And then we do coping strategies like counting to 10. And it's very important, and I know you probably know this, when you're teaching coping strategies, you model it for them. So you don't just say count to 10, you do it with them, like count to 10, and you demonstrate it, you do it with them. Another thing is, because we have an integrated approach, we know in the sports sessions, there are also skills they're learning. So we relate it to something they're also doing in another session. So again, they see the connections.
Like a
So
holistic approach as well.
it's a holistic approach. I think that that's what's so cool about the UP program, is that everybody plays a role in supporting the young person. So the coach does things in sessions. The psychologist and the social workers will do things in their one-on-ones with young people. The program coordinator does things. So by linking everything they're getting, they now have kind of a toolkit. So we will lean on what they're doing in the boxing sessions. Like we'll say, well, what does coach say whenever you're getting frustrated? And they'll be like, that can help me when I'm angry. And you're like, yes, it's the same thing. And they begin to realize sports is not separate from personal development.
Yep.
It's not separate.
It's not.
And it goes back to us all operating in the same way. So they get the same message in different ways. And another thing we do is we meet the young person where they are. Yes, I'm a psychologist, but we do know they may not open up to me immediately, but maybe they have a really good relationship with a coach. That's where the psychological first aid comes in, because he can do the initial. He can begin to develop that trust and so forth. So it's a lot of different things, but the big things are helping them to find out what they're feeling, name it, and then very practical strategies. And also we acknowledge when they're doing it right, because sometimes we
reward.
Well, it's
not reward.
We don't give them something, but like we acknowledge it. So for instance, I'll use a real example. There was like a young lady I worked with who always used to lie whenever she got upset, because she would usually lash out. So she would lie about what happened to just cut the conversation. And she still lashed out, but this time she was honest about it. That's a step in the right direction. So you acknowledge, while the response may not have been the best, you do highlight, but you were honest about it. And then we can have a conversation around it. So you celebrate the small wins so that they keep working until they have this big win.
What about, you just made me think about, culturally, generally, we struggle with actually, like, I love that example that you said, although she lashed, she was honest. So sometimes it's very hard for us to say, okay, maybe this wasn't appropriate, but I see where you were, what you're doing, and we can support you through this. Where we have difficulty with de-escalation, or how to talk out things. Do you do any kind of, modeling or role playing to, like, kind of, I know sometimes I incorporate, I'm not a music therapist, I'm not an expressive therapist, I just use art, but knowing the culture, I incorporate movement, I might incorporate music, and I've done that kind of like modeling dialogue or working something through using an instrument and talking to the client, and they're getting, whatever they need to get out. Are there some, how do you deal with situations where it's hard for someone to learn how to de-escalate, or it's the same 4 tips that you just said before?
It's a bit of the same 4 tips. In terms of teaching skills like that, again, it goes back to this holistic approach, where they have many choices of how to respond. And this is why you have to build a relationship, and you really have to meet the individual where they are. So for example, if you know a young person is not that interested in writing as a way of getting out feelings, it wouldn't be in your best interest to say, hey, why not keep a journal? Because they're going to look at you and they're not going to utilize it. And then they experience this continuous failure. So for me, it's very important to know who you're dealing with, like really get to know them. which is why a strengths-based approach is also very important, because they have some tools. Like when you talk to them, they're not blank slates. They know, they just need guidance with it. So you begin to talk about it. So you may say, okay, let's say you're in a boxing session. I usually try to create distance from the actual situation sometimes, because if you stick to the situation, they could stay up here.
Yeah, escalate.
Right. So when you move away and use another situation where they utilize the same skills and walk them through it. So I might say, okay, you remember that boxing match you did? Yeah, man, I remember it. And you remember you lost? Yeah, man, how did you feel when you lost? And then they talk about some of the very same emotions that
they had with the first.
And I say, yeah, but you didn't lash out. You didn't go after your opponent. I remember you shook his hand. What led you to choose that action? And then they will say,
start thinking.
oh, well, one thing is that I remember before the match, I spoke to Uncle John and he said that we can talk after. So I figured, it don't make sense to take it out on him. It just makes sense to go reason with Uncle John and get it out there. So I try not to tell people. It's not good to tell somebody. It's more to kind of point them in the right direction, which is, again, why you highlight what they're doing right, because they sometimes struggle. We all do this. We don't realize that what we do in one situation can translate to another. And with a holistic approach, you need them to realize the sports connects to this, connects to personal development. We need them to say all the connections. So they build up this tool. I like to think of the UP program and psychological first aid is that we have young persons with these messy cupboards. They have everything they need. Like they're very resilient. They're very motivated. We help them to organize their cupboards. And if they're missing something, guide them in the right direction to get what they're missing. So when a situation occurs, they can be like, okay, this is what I need. And they pull for it.
I like that, Michelle. Organizing the cupboard using psychological first aid. Wow.
And I will say,
maybe
it takes time. It takes
time.
It
does. It takes time. Well, we're human, and I mean, it's not gonna be, everything is not gonna go like this. It's layers, just like how you said the cupboards, need to be organized. Persons have different emotions, children, young adults. There's so many layers. I mean, just like even what's happening now, there are multiple layers. So, yes, I need to deal with school, but if I don't have access to the internet, my educational needs are not going to be met. That's going to weigh on my self-esteem. Then I have a medical concern looming because of COVID. So that is fair. Then maybe my family dynamics, who knows what's happening during that time. So you have, and then in the community, so then you have layers. So then working with persons, you have to peel back the layers as best as possible. And sometimes you're going to have resistance. And sometimes you're going to have breakthroughs. So I think, being patient, I think, with the process as well. And I love what you said. I think we all forget. We sometimes, and I've done this once with a client, and the feedback I had gotten was like, what are the strengths of the client? And that completely shifted the approach. So we can focus on the negatives, but how can we use the strengths to build resilience, to use that as a coping mechanism, or to enhance it so that you can use it, or use it for your community, yourself, and your family. So, Miss Michelle, are there any therapy tips that you can give us, or you gave us already?
I'll add some. Before I do that, I will say this. One of the key things is to acknowledge, well, this is actually a tip. It's important to acknowledge that what they're feeling is okay. I think sometimes we all feel this pressure to be okay all the time and not acknowledge certain emotions. But it's very important to let them know, if you are concerned about school, that's okay. It's to be expected. If you're worried about finances, it's okay. So the first tip is acknowledge what the person is feeling. Young, old, acknowledge that what they're feeling and tell them it's okay. Tell them it's okay. Another tip, especially when in a situation like COVID, or when you're under stress, or when everything feels kind of very chaotic, as much as possible, keep a routine, which is why having our sessions are very important, because you kind of want to bring a sense of calm to the chaos. So they kind of know, at least in one aspect or a couple of aspects of their lives, they know what to expect. So it could be, okay, Tuesdays is book club. I also have a CXE remedial session. Try to keep a routine so that amidst the chaos, they have some sense of normalcy.
Of normalcy, yeah.
Yeah. Another one is create opportunities to have fun, whether it's a dance party, whether it's doing some exercise. If you notice, our coaches get or art, drawing, writing. Create opportunities to have fun. Like, give them an opportunity to enjoy what's happening around them. And coupled with that, that is acknowledging the positives. Every day, try to identify one or two things that went really, really well, because it again helps you to develop a more growth-minded mindset. Shout out to Big Life Journal. But it helps them to not only focus on all of the negatives, and if you're able to highlight the positives, you're already in a frame of mind to kind of address the negatives. You know, you're feeling good. So I had to do it today, where right before this call, I got some not so great news, and I was feeling frustrated, and then I heard my nephews laughed, and I was like, oh, it's a good afternoon. You know, so try to highlight the positives, and most importantly, reach out when you need help. Everybody needs support. Everybody needs some assistance at some point, and normalize it, because you know the saying, pressure bust pipe. We don't want whole heap of pipe busting. We want them to know that whenever you do need support, it is there. It is there. So tell them, reach out when you need help. Even in the organization, and I will say, we definitely try as much as possible to walk the walk and talk the talk. So even as a team, before any team meeting, there will be a check-in. Similar to your check-in feeling. How are you doing? How are you feeling? And so forth. The same way we do it with each other, encourage young people to reach out. Let us know when you need some support. It could be, I need a timeout. I need a moment. Give it to them. So those are just some quick tips.
Those are some really strong, I wrote them down, 5 tips. So Michelle, thanks for sharing that. Is Fight for Peace doing any projects right now, and where can you be reached? Where can the organization be reached?
Doing any project right now? I see Miss Magnus. We're always working. we do have, so I wouldn't word it in terms of projects. We do have activities. There is one project that we are going to be focusing. Oh no, I'll talk about 2 projects. One is a capacity building. It's focused on capacity building of community-based organizations. So again, it goes to helping to achieve potential. So we're doing a series of workshops and trainings to help build their capacity so that they can then implement programs they may have thought about. So that's one program. Another program, I'll be very vague on purpose, but it's building community relationships with especially with security forces.
Okay.
It's just building and fostering more relationships. I see Miss
That's
Magnus is still with us. Miss Magnus, do you want to?
And I guess
I'll run down some of the activities we have. We have a book club, Fighting Words Book Club, which allows, it's not so much like school books in terms of, focus on literacy skills, but it's using books to promote behavior change and getting kids to look at books as exciting, as something they want to do. So that's one very exciting thing for book club. We of course have our sports sessions in boxing, mixed martial arts, taekwondo, capoeira, edgy sports. We have personal development sessions. We do have another project which is focused on, oh gosh, it just flows in my head. It will come, sexual safety, but particularly on understanding that there are some gender differences. But all of our projects, no matter what the project is, no matter what the theme is, they're all done with this 5-pillar methodology under the framework of PFA. So it's sometimes hard to say this is a specific project and this is a specific
that's fine.
Because we operate.
Okay, I see you got a shout out, Miss Michelle earlier. KD Technical said hi, Auntie. KD Technical said hi, Auntie Michelle.
Is one of our young people. Hi,
Kamani. Awesome. So if as we come to a close, if anybody has any questions, they want to type it in the comments for Michelle or I. This was, I think, a great topic for the end of the 10th episode of the Therapy Tuesdays. If there are any questions or anything, any pointers that have that stood out for anybody from the 10 episodes, you can DM me on Art Therapy JA. If you've missed the episode, you can watch it back on IGTV or on Art Therapy Jamaica's YouTube channel, or check our website, arttherapyjamaica.com. So if there aren't any questions, and I don't know, Michelle, if you have any questions for me, we will do our checkout activity. If you don't have any questions for me. No questions for me? None? So I think the tips that you gave us, I remember it was identify the feelings, naming the emotions, establishing coping strategies is what you use, and acknowledging feelings, I think, or acknowledging where they are at. And then there's a second set of tips that you gave us, which is acknowledging feelings again, keeping a routine as best as possible, creating an opportunity to have fun, whatever that looks like, whether it's a sporting activity, cooking, maybe art, acknowledging the positives, and reaching out for support. So in terms of reaching out for support, Fight for Peace is an avenue for support for our children. Art Therapy Jamaica is another avenue of support. So as we come to our close, we will do our checkout/harvest activity. And Michelle, you have a really cool harvest activity that we will have the viewers do or engage in as well.
All right. So it's a very simple activity, and I couldn't find a pot, or in truth, my mother would not allow me to take out a pot out of her kitchen. But as we have conversations, you and I both bring something to the table. We both get something out of the conversation, and we want to start thinking about how do we take this further. So my very simple harvest activities, we both state what we brought and what we put in the pot. It's funny, the card says thank you for your donation, so it's so what did we put in the pot? What did we take out of the pot/box? And how can we take these learnings even further? So I'll let you go. Okay,
I'll go first, but I also ask the viewers to type in what did they put into the pot or the live today? What did they get out of it, and how will you continue these learnings? So for me, what did I put in? Knowledge and opportunity for persons to get information and support, or have a platform for that to happen.
Okay. I brought to the pot my passion, my excitement, and I'll leave it there. the third one. So my passion and
okay, what did we get out of the pot? I got new information, or even reinforced information, or new ways to add to my approach in terms of working with children. So that's what I get from the pot today.
What I got out of the pot is learning a little bit more about another approach that I've always had interest in, but maybe I didn't realize how similar it could be to what I'm already doing. So I'm excited to have learned about that. So I took out new knowledge and understanding. And then the last thing is how we're going to take our learnings further.
Well, in this age of technology, I will be expanding, and hopefully, well, in terms of how to use it in art therapy, the same thing. How can I enhance it, use it more, and try to reframe some of these video postings, these lives, in a way that persons can access it again in different levels, whether it's on the YouTube, LinkedIn channels, IG, and for persons to access that even more and to continue to do the work.
Yes. I second the expanding the learnings by continuing to do the work. I will continue to fly the Up Unity and Peace Program flag high, but also to expand the learnings, be open to exploring other ways we can enhance the work we're already doing. So looking at how we can add to already a great pot.
Okay. Well, thank you guys. Thank you, Michelle, for coming on and giving us some really good Fight for Peace tips and tips that you use with the children. Thank you again. Again, if anybody has any questions or wants to know any information about art therapy, you can check out the website arttherapyjamaica.com. This is the 10th episode of the season. Oh, thanks. Kelly said, thank you so much for showcasing Fight for Peace, and definitely interested in seeing how we can integrate art. Me too. So if you have any questions, you can email me. Please, if there are any pointers from any of the episodes that stood out to you, send me a message on Instagram. Check out our YouTube channel. We will be back. I don't know yet. I think maybe sometime in September for another set of episodes. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Michelle. Have a great Tuesday.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Leslie.
Okay.